Calder Wind was walking carefully along the fence line, looking for any broken sections after the stormy night. Crouched down to investigate a pair of coyote tracks, he spotted a faint red smear on the snow. Calder initially believed it to be blood from a hunt, but as he got closer, his heart tightened. Lying curled up behind a low pine tree, nearly buried in snow, was a little Apache girl. Maybe 6 years old. Her lips were crimson from the cold. Her tiny body quivering like a blade of grass in the wind. Her eyes were locked tight, her breath little more than a wisp of fog. "Oh God," Calder murmured, collapsing to his knees. He placed a hand on the girl's back. She was really chilly. The chill shot straight through him. Without hesitation, he slipped off his heavy coat, wrapped it firmly over her, and lifted her up, pulling her against his chest to share his body heat. "Do not fall asleep. Do you hear me? Remain awake." His voice trembled in the wind. On the way back to the cabin, Calder could feel her breath growing weaker with every step. It felt like he was carrying her entire life in his arms. As soon as he went inside, he kindled a fire as fast as he could, place the girl near the stove, and put a pot of water on to warm. She muttered something so soft he almost missed it. "Nami," Calder leaned in, saying back, "Yeah, Nami, just keep breathing. Let me handle the rest." Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside the hut, one fragile life clung to the dying warmth of winter. 2 days later, the snowstorm still had not let up. The landscape was covered by a thick, endless blanket of white. Calder had stayed up nearly the entire night, keeping the fire running, making sure the little child stayed warm. He would put his warm palm to Nami's forehead each time she shook from a fever and whisper, "Hang in there, little one. It is not time to give up yet." By lunchtime on the second day, as Calder was splitting wood out in the yard, the wind suddenly shifted, bearing with it a heavy, dragging sound, like someone pulling their weary body through deep snow. After setting down the log, he pivoted. An Apache woman emerged from the dazzling whiteness. She had a warrior's height and wide shoulders, her arms muscular but covered in bruises, whip marks, knife cuts, and dried blood trailed from her neck down to her waist. Her breathing was harsh and broken, nearly wasted. She came to a halt a short distance from Calder. Her deep dark eyes were worn and exhausted, but still awake. Her voice sounded strained and hoarse. "You are keeping my daughter." Calder did neither retreat or advance. His voice seemed surprisingly calm. "She is inside the hut, still alive. Go in if you'd like." The woman stumbled in the direction of the door and almost fell when her hand came into contact with the wooden frame. Calder reached out barely in time to catch her arm. That it was as cold as stone and as unyielding as oak. He assisted her inside. As the fire light flickered across the sleeping girl's face, the woman's body trembled with a sudden violent shiver. Her bloodshot eyes welled with tears that clung to the corners of her Wild West love story. She crouched next to Nami and touched the child's cheek with her shaking fingers. She let out a stifled sob. "Nami, my little Nami." Calder poured a cup of warm water and placed it near her. "Sit down. You are bleeding." She looked up at him, still wary, but no longer desperate. "My name is Talia." Calder gave her a gentle nod. The storm continued to roar outside, seemingly attempting to split the globe apart. The route going to the Apache mountain range was completely blocked by snow. Talia was too weak to walk, much less stand. Calder added more wood to the stove, then said, "You and the girl stay here. When the weather clears, we will figure it out." Talia stared into the fire for a long pause, then murmured, "No white man has ever assisted us like this." Calder just said, without pride or praise, "I merely did what was right." From that point on, but neither of them said it out loud. They both knew that the snowstorm was just the start of a bond neither of them had expected. That night, the wind had quieted considerably, but the cold still lingered like a ghost, clinging to every part of the cottage. Nami was fast sleeping, her breathing more even now, due to 2 days under Calder's care. Talia sat against the wall, her huge frame covered in wounds, but her mother's eyes never left the child. Calder fed more wood into the fire while he sat near the stove. The orange glow bathed his face, creating a rare moment of tranquility in the midst of a brutal winter. Talia gazed at him for a long time before speaking, her voice rough, like every syllable was being wrenched from her throat. "You never asked me what happened." Calder laid the wood down and stared at her through the flames. "That I Wild West stories for sleep. Figured if you wanted to talk, you would. And I wasn't going to press if you didn't." Talia let out a faint laugh, exhausted, but laced with a trace of respect. "No white man ever says that." She drew the huge blanket tighter around her shoulders, taking a deep breath as if summoning the fortitude to open a door sealed shut by blood. "My tribe was attacked. They killed everyone. The aged, the children, anyone who could not run." Her voice cracked like stone shattering under ice. "I knew they wanted Nami. She is still young, but she carries the blood of the old chief. They wanted that blood gone." Calder squeezed his hand slightly, but said nothing. "I struck her beneath a bush. To get them to leave, I ran in the opposite direction. I wanted them to chase me so she could live." With her hands squeezed so firmly that her knuckles became white, she bent her head. "I believed I would die, yet destiny prevented me from doing so." The firelight shimmered in her damp eyes. "When I came back, the bush was empty. She was gone. Everyone had left." Calder asked quietly, "How long did you look for her?" 2 days. No food, no sleep. I roamed like someone out of their head till I collapsed right at your doorstep." There was silence. All that was left was the sound of flames crackling. Calder spoke gently. "You did what any mother would have done." After witnessing her daughter's survival, Talia's eyes, which had before been dark and deep with grief, began to flicker with a brittle hope. "I thought I lost her forever." Calder nodded towards the sleeping child. "No, she is here and she is safe." With a broken voice, Talia lowered her head. "And you alone were responsible for that." The distance between Calder and Talia started to close that night between the firelight and the howling wind outside, not through physical contact, but rather because of the wounds they both knew too well. The next morning, the snowstorm had not yet passed, but inside the small cabin, something warm and unfamiliar had begun to fill the air. Nami was more alert now, eating a few spoonfuls of the porridge Calder had cooked. Each time she held his hand, Talia's deep black eyes seemed to soften just a little. Up on the roof, Calder was making repairs. Despite her injuries, Talia, insistent on offering assistance. Her strength made him gaze her way more than once. Raised a large wooden board with one arm, the kind that usually takes 2 grown men to carry it. By late afternoon, the snow had eased into a gentle flurry. Talia stood near the window, pale light falling on her damaged face. Calder entered with a bowl of warm water. "You ought to sleep more." Talia gave him a look. Her eyes no longer retained the guarded look from earlier days. There was something else now. Something that made Calder hold his breath. "Calder." She said his name for the first time. He stopped not too far away. Talia weighed every word, every meaning, every line that separated them as she looked down at her rough hands and then back into his gaze. "You saved my daughter. You took care of her as if she were your own." Calder gave a quiet reply. "I simply acted morally." Talia stepped closer. He could see her breath rising in the chilly air between them since they were so close. Her voice was low, steady, and so honest it hid nothing. "You are a good dude." She placed her strong, somewhat trembling hand on his chest where his heart was pounding. And then Talia uttered something no woman says lightly, something spoken not with desperation but with the clarity of a warrior who has walked through fire and lived to tell it. "Plant your seed in me, and my daughter needs a father beside her." Calder stood still, not out of astonishment but out of meaning, out of the weight of her trust, because the woman standing before him was not pleading, she was delivering her future to a stranger with open eyes and no regrets. He gazed into her eyes, which were full of grief and a fresh glimmer of hope. "Talia," his voice grew husky. "Love stories from the Wild West. You sure?" She rested her forehead against his, murmuring, "I have lost everything. But you are where I want to stay." There was no kiss. Not then, no rush of passion. Only 2 persons standing nearby, inhaling the same air, comprehending each other deeper than words ever could. Outside, the snowstorm was disappearing. Inside the cabin, something new was beginning. Something neither of them had been seeking for. However, in some way, find each other. Thank you for being here. If this story brings back memories of hoofbeats and dusty afternoons resonating in your chest, then go to subscribe to my channel. Every day we may meet together again and I will tell you another tale from the West. That nightfall, the snow finally ceased. The sun fell behind the mountains, leaving a stretch of dusky purple and blue across the grassland. Calder kindled a fire larger than usual, partly for warmth, but largely because the cabin felt like it required more light tonight, as if something important was going to happen. The firelight danced across Talia's sun-kissed complexion as she sat on the edge of the bed, highlighting every powerful feature that had been softened by fatigue. Wrapped in the thickest blanket in the home, Nami was sound asleep close to the stove. Calder entered and placed a bowl of warm water next to Talia. He added, attempting to maintain a steady tone, "Your wounds need to be cleaned again." Talia gave him a long, intense gaze. So long, Calder began to wonder whether he had said something wrong. After that, she got up and moved gently until she was directly in front of him. "Are you scared? I will change my mind." She spoke in a quiet, stone-like voice. Calder took a long breath. "I feel terrified. I am not good enough for the both of you." Talia placed her enormous, calloused hands on either side of his face, gently guiding his eyes to hers. "My daughter was saved by you. You warmed her. You kept her alive when the world turned its back on her." She pushed her forehead against best Wild West love stories his, whispering like it was a vow. "You are superior than everyone else." Calder could feel her breath so close it sent his heart beating. Not from want, but from something that had developed too fast, too strong to be ignored, Talia continued. "I do not want pity. I want to be selected." Calder responded softly. "I already chose you." The instant those words left his lips, Talia pulled him. There was no rush, no taking, just a "Give me a kiss." Slow, deep, filled with gratitude. And a quiet hunger to live again as a person, not just a survivor. Calder wrapped his arms around her, holding the robust body that now trembled not from cold but because for the first time in so long she felt safe. That night they laid together on the old bed made of wood. Calder gently cleaned Talia's wounds with warm water. Time he touched her, she closed her eyes, not from pain but from the feeling of being cared for, something she had overlooked as she lay her head on his chest, her hand placed over the steady pounding of his heart. She whispered, "If tomorrow morning you want me to leave, I will." Calder tightened his arms around her. "Tomorrow morning and every morning after, I want you here." Talia smiled slightly in the dark, a tiny smile that has the power to transform the entire winter. It was a quiet evening on their first night together. It was just two people who had lost everything discovering each other just when they needed it most. Winter didn't appear to go away from the prairie. But one morning, Calder stepped out onto the porch and noticed the snow was soft beneath his boots. For the first time in weeks, sunlight burst through the gray skies. The wind had subsided, but the air was still extremely chilly. The sky was shifting. Inside the cabin, Nami giggled beside the firewood pile, her first laugh since Calder had met her. Talia was tying back her daughter's hair, her huge hands moving with unexpected care. Calder paused for a moment, just watching them. He felt a warm current flow down his back. That feeling, the feeling of belonging, was something he had not touched in a long, long time. By midday, while Nami dozed, Talia strolled out onto the porch where Calder was repairing a mallet. He assumed she had only come to observe the horizon because of how calmly she stood next to him. Then, however, she talked clearly and slowly. Called her. He looked up. Talia glanced out at the distant mountains. She seemed to have been waiting years to say the words, as evidenced by her deep, full sigh. "I have been running month after FRM fight to battle. I have no one left." She looked up at him, and her eyes, once full of controlled strength, now revealed something unexpected. Vulnerability. "I want to stop." Calder set the mallet down and listened. Completely present. I want to stop running. I want to live somewhere I do not have to look over my shoulder every night. Talia took a slow, steady breath, then whispered, I want to belong to you. If you will have me that way in that moment. Calder did not think that he did not weigh it or fear it. He simply came closer and placed both hands softly on her shoulders. You already do. The lone rancher was steady and his voice was low, like a long-forgotten vow. Everything you require is right here. Talia shut her eyes, her broad shoulders trembled. Slightly not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time since losing her tribe, she felt kept. Then she directed Calder's hand to her tummy, breath harsh as fire. Think I carry your child? Calder did not answer right, but he looked into her eyes that has seen death, and now flickered with life. He grabbed her into his arms, keeping her close, and murmured quietly, but with the weight of stone, then that is all the more reason for you to stay. Inside the cabin, Nami stirred and shouted out. Mom, called her. The two of them glanced at each other and shared a modest smile, the smile of people who had finally found home. That morning, the first sunlight in weeks filtered through the window, throwing a soft golden glow around the cabin. Calder was tending the fire when he heard little footsteps running toward him. Nami, wrapped in a blanket, stood with sleepy eyes, still heavy but sparkling like a tranquil lake. She stood in front of him for a minute, silent as if gathering confidence. Can I call you father? Nami said, softly tugging at the hem of his shirt. The words hit his chest like a warm wind. Calder knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. With her dry lips slightly parted, Nami stared at him without blinking, waiting for his response as if her tiny soul were hanging on a thread. He placed a hand on her lovely black hair. You already have. Nami blinked, confused. He had a warm, deep smile. You have called me father every time you hugged me in the morning. When you were afraid, you always held my hand. You simply hadn't expressed it aloud, yet each time you remained near me. Tears welled up in Nami's eyes, but not from sadness. She put her arms around him with such vigor. He almost lost balance. Calder hugged her closely, his chest tightening with an emotion he believed had died with his wife long ago. Silently, Talia stood at the doorway and observed. The sunlight touched her beautiful black hair. There was no envy on her face, no hesitation, only a deep, serene peace. I knew she would choose you, she said. Calder, still cradling Nami in his arms, turned to face Talia. In that moment, he realized this area was no longer the cabin of a lonely guy. It had become the home of three. Calder took out an old wooden box from under the bed one afternoon when Nami was sleeping. Inside was a photograph of his late wife, the kind woman who had left him 4 years ago during the outbreak. He sat in silence, staring at the photo. There was no more pain, only a quiet sorrow that had never gone. He kissed the edge of the frame, then placed it in a deeper compartment, one Wild West Stories podcast only he knew. On the shelf, he placed something new in its place. A little seed pouch hand-stitched by Talia with familiar Apache threads woven into the seams. A subtle symbol, but enough to say he has chosen the course for his life. As the dusk drew in, the three of them sat on the porch. The breeze of spring swept over the prairie in a gentle manner. Nami sat in Calder's lap and Talia leaned against his shoulder. No one said anything grand, but in that silence, truth became clear. They were no longer three people lost in the world. They'd become a family. Spring laid gold across the prairie. New grass began to push through the remnants of the snow. Calder built a new stretch of fencing. Nami toddled around, clutching nails, while Talia helped lift the large boards. Her strength made things seem only half as perfect. The cabin was no longer just a shelter from the cold, that it was becoming a home made by hands trying to reconstruct a life. One morning, Calder and Talia were digging behind the cabin. The aroma of early wildflowers was wafted by the breeze. Talia gave him some beans and maize kernels. These were what my mother used to grow. And now they belong to our home. Calder felt the word "our" sink in his chest like a strange, soft sensation that he believed he would never be able to experience again. Rancher lived alone for years. Nami helped water the land, her tiny hands holding a wooden dipper nearly bigger than her head. Every time the water washed her cheeks, she burst into laughter, dragging Calder's laughing with her and a gentle shake of the head from Talia. Where previously there was only wind and solitude, now there was the sound of a youngster laughing, the sound every home needs to bring back to life. By late afternoon, the three of them erected a chicken coop, called her Hammered Nails. Talia held the board steady, and Nami raced around collecting dry leaves, pronouncing them the most beautiful nests in the world, No one argued. To them, the world needed nothing more than that. The entire family sat on the porch as the sun started to drop. The spring wind was mild, and the scent of wood smoke hung in the air. Talia snuggled into Calder's shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist while Nami dozed in her mother's lap. Talia whispered, "We are not married." Calder smiled, "We do not need to be. No rings for marriage. We do not need those either. No preacher. No promises." She halted and glanced up at him. "Do you find that depressing?" Calder kissed her forehead gently. "Homes are not constructed on vows, Talia. They are predicated on our continued existence, each and every morning we wake up." Talia exhaled quietly, like a leaf falling to the earth. A child's hand was resting on her belly. Containing both their blood was quietly expanding, day by day. In that moment, Calder knew there were no rings, no rituals, but everything seemed more vivid than any custom he had ever. The ancient cabin used to be chilly and dead was now so full of warmth. The blackness has vanished. The spring wind swept over the porch, touching three people leaning towards each other. A family not linked by obligation, but by the option to stay, and they had chosen forever. Love doesn't have to start with a vow or be maintained by ritual. It grows in the quietest of moments, a hand carrying a wound, the warmth of a fire, a child saying father for the first time. True love is not loud. It does not demand. It just requests that two individuals who have been shattered have the courage to reopen their hearts. And when they chose to stay, not out of duty, but because their emotions lead them there, that is love powerful enough to outlast winter and time. Then, sir, love was spoken that day. In the end, I simply hope that you two are loved, safe, and happy. I love you, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me what this story meant to you. Leave a comment below. Tap the number 8 if you loved this story, and do not forget to subscribe for more amazing tales from the wild.